No service offered in the salon industry delivers more profit and a steadier and more loyal client base than the hair coloring service. The better we as stylists and owners understand permanent hair color, the more confident and comfortable we will be promoting this service. Hello, my name is David Foote, and I have been learning and teaching hair color since 1985. And what I'll be sharing with you today is what I have found to be the keys to understanding the thought process of permanent hair color. No matter what brand of color you choose, there are definite similarities in the usages of them. The information you'll learn will make you much more confident and comfortable doing hair color. Because most problems occur when stylists think that the color you put on the client's hair is the one you end up with. This is not necessarily true. Or after a few applications, the ends start looking dull or drab or even green or violet. Once you learn the basic principles behind why permanent hair color does what it does, you will no longer have these problems or be afraid of using, doing, or talking to clients about hair color. This tape is the first in a series of educational videos dedicated to a common sense approach to hair coloring. This tape has a lot of technical information in it and should be viewed with your color chart nearby. Keep this information in mind while doing hair color in your own salon, and soon understanding the thought process will become second nature and very little will stump you. Now, after we go through all the different components that make up permanent hair color, we will go through how to achieve better gray coverage, how to better maintain your blondes and your redheads, and we'll touch on the double process blonde. So let's get to it. Before we start with hair color, we're going to talk a little bit about hair, because hair color is only part of the formula. Depending on what kind of hair you're putting the color on, your end result will vary a little bit. So there's two words I want you to always keep in mind when you're doing permanent hair color. The first word is the texture of the hair. So what is texture? Texture is whether the hair is thick or coarse, or whether it's fine or thin. It's the size or the diameter of the hair shaft. Why is that important? Once we get into the actual meat or the information of this tape, we'll find out how the texture of the hair relates to our end result. The second word I want to talk about is porosity. What do we know about porosity? Porosity, as we learned in school, is the ability for hair to absorb and retain moisture. So how does that relate to hair color? Knowing porosity in that sense really doesn't help it relate very well. So keep this in mind. If you can look at porosity or porous hair as hair color's biggest enemy, you'll be doing yourselves a favor. More problems are caused, or more problems occur, because we the stylists misjudge the porosity of the hair, or we don't take into consideration the porosity of the hair. Porosity. Porosity is a feel to the hair, or it can even be a look to the hair if it's very porous. On any given head, you can have multi-porosity hair or different levels of porosity on the same head. If you take a head of hair and you look at the scalp area and you feel it, you can feel that it feels smoother. As you bring your hands out the hair shaft, you'll feel it starts getting a little bit rougher all the way to the ends, where typically it's the roughest. The rougher the hair feels, or the drier the hair feels or looks, the more porous the hair is. And all the adjusting and the remixing of our formulas that I'll talk about throughout the tape deal with the porosity factor. You'll hear the word porosity come up a great deal within the tape because it's very, very important, and often it is overlooked. If we can remember also one statement about porous hair that I don't think will ever change, and that is porous hair will always accept or try to absorb the base or the muddiness or the ashiness of a color, and it will always reject the warmth of a color. That's very important to understand when we go to run color through the ends, because porous hair will always try to absorb the base, the muddiness, or the ashiness and reject the warmth. As we go through and we remix our formulas or add into our formulas, you'll see that we're always adding more warmth or more red to the formula to adjust for the porosity. Now there's also a couple statements I always like to remember when I go through my hair coloring process. The first statement is KISS. Keep it simple. There's no need for us to complicate our formulas when we are formulating our colors. There's no need to complicate them. Keep them simple until you get very confident and very comfortable with the system you're using. Don't go off and play right away. I play a great deal. I'm very into playing with hair color, so I'm not saying don't. I'm saying get comfortable and very confident with the system you're using before you play. Until you get to the point where you can tell yourself, if I take this color and put it on this hair, this will be my end result. Until you know that, don't start combining one tone with another tone, because if something goes wrong, you'll never quite know what it was unless you know what it would have been if you kept it simple. That's the KISS method. The second thing we always need to remember is permanent hair color does two things. It lifts or lightens the hair, and it deposits or puts color into the hair simultaneously. It does both of those at the same time. However, to understand permanent hair color and why it does what it does, keep in mind that most of the lightening action is done in your first part of the color. Most of your depositing action is done in your later timing of the color. Most of the lift is done in your first part. Most of the depositing is done in the second part, even though they do them simultaneously. That's why I always recommend maximum timing on gray hair, redheads, and light blondes. Gray hair, redheads because we want maximum deposit of the color molecules, and light blondes because we want maximum control of our tone. Maximum control of the tone, we will certainly get into that in a little bit into this tape. So getting into hair color, we first need to understand a little bit about developers. Basically, within the industry, we use 5 developer strengths, basically speaking. Developer, peroxide, basically the same thing, only developer is not only the newer term for it, but I like to look at it, it's the tube term for a peroxide. Developers also have special conditioning agents and stabilizers in them to help them work better with the cream colors we're now using. So what are the 5? We have a 0 volume developer, a 10 volume developer, a 20 volume developer, 30 volume, and a 40 volume developer. So let's find out what they do. 0 volume developer, we never use 0 volume alone. 0 volume was created to be mixed with a higher volume developer to lower the strength. Why do we need to lower the strength? When we're doing a filler service or we're doing a toning service, we typically use a 5 volume developer. Most manufacturers don't make a 5 volume, so you would simply take 0 volume, mix it equal parts with a 10 volume, and you create a 5 volume. If you need to make a 10 volume, 0 volume, equal parts with 20 volume, create a 10 volume. So you say, how come for 100 years we've been using distilled water or tap water to lower our volume strengths, and it's always worked? Why all of a sudden do we need to go out and buy a 0 volume? Well, I look at it that the 0 volume keeps the integrity of the product you're using. Because of the way our environment's been working in the last many years, we're not sure if my water system might have a high copper content, where yours might have a high chlorine content. The minerals vary so much throughout the world that the 0 volume, using that instead of your tap water, keeps the integrity of the product. It keeps the other minerals from getting into the formula where they don't belong. So that's 0 volume. 10 volume developer gives you maximum deposit with minimum lift, up to about 1 level of lift. 20 volume developer gives you very good deposit and an average amount of lift. What we're talking about is up to about 2 levels. 30 volume developer gives you more lift with less deposit. It will give you about 3 levels of lift. 40 volume developer gives you maximum lift up to about 4 levels with minimum deposit. Now when we get into doing permanent hair color, it's kind of important to remember about the developer strengths. Just remember, the higher the volume, the more lift you get, but the less deposit you get. That's the key, is really that you understand the higher the volume that you need to use to get the lift you're looking for, it gives you less deposit or less control of your tone. So that's enough of developer strengths. Most manufacturers use the level system to explain their color. So what is a level? What a level is, it's an exact measurement of lightness and darkness. It has nothing to do with what color you're seeing. It merely tells us how light or how dark the color is. All the numbers on your charts relate to what level they are or what depth that color has. As you can see, the lower the number, the darker the color. The higher the number, the lighter the color. So take a look at your charts. Let's look at a level 6. All of the level 6s on your chart are exactly the same lightness and darkness. The only difference between them is the color that they are. If you took the color out, you would see that all those swatches were exactly the same lightness, darkness. That goes for any particular level that you're at. If you're at a level 8, look at all the 8s on your board. They're all different colors. If you take the color out, they're all exactly the same lightness or darkness. The difference between them is, like I said, the color, or the actual tone that your eye sees. Okay, so let's take a look at these swatches here. In the system I'm currently using, these swatches are a level 8 medium blonde. We have a medium ash blonde. We have a medium blonde. We have a medium warm blonde, a medium red blonde, and a more fashion red blonde. All of these are level 8s. If you can notice, we're taking the color out of them. They all appear to be the same because they are. They're all level 8 colors. We put the color back into them, and they all appear to be very different. That's because the tone of the color is different. Remember, level, how light or dark. Tone is the overall hue or the color that your eye is seeing. That's the difference. It's important to keep it separate in our minds while we're formulating hair color. We need to keep in mind how light or dark. We need to keep in mind what the actual color is that we're looking for. So now that we understand the difference between a level and a tone, let's get into formulating a little bit. Most manufacturers agree on 4 steps to formulating your hair color. The first thing that we need to do is to determine the client's natural level. What color is her hair naturally growing out from the scalp? The second thing we need to do is to determine the level we wish to achieve. How light or how dark do we want our end result? The third thing we need to think about is what tone do we want to end up? Level, how light or dark. Tone is what color does she want to be? The fourth thing we need to think about is what's the correct developer we need to use to achieve the level we want to end up. To do that, I like to take the swatch chart over to the client. I usually put it right in the client's lap so she can have a view of all the choices that either she can have or wants to have. Now, while she's looking at all the choices, I'm taking the neutral series swatches and I'm matching it to her natural hair closest to the scalp. After I do that, I will now know the first step, the client's natural level. The second and third step is directly related to the consultation. When we are choosing a color, the client is looking at a swatch while I'm looking at both the level number and the tonal value she wants. Remember, when she points to one swatch, she's telling you 2 things, the level she wants to be and the tone she wants to be. I usually put the swatches right up to her forehead near her eyes so both of us see the desired color against her skin tone and eye color. That helps to decide whether the level and tone are right for her. Another reason I bring the swatch chart over to the client is because we all see color differently. What's red to me might not be red to you, or what's neutral to me might be red to you. So by using the swatch chart as a tool for the consultation, it leaves no chance for guessing when choosing a color. Remember, we all see color differently. If she's pointing at a neutral swatch and she says, I don't want to have any red in it like this, you'll know exactly what she perceives to be red or neutral. Okay, so it leaves no chance for guesswork. The fourth thing we need to think about is what developer strength do we use to achieve the level we want to end up with. So to formulate for the level, manufacturers have two ways to formulate for the level. Some of the manufacturers, looking back at the level system chart, some of the manufacturers say it is as easy with this color line as if you want to end up at a particular level, you would use that level color. Which means, if you wanted to end up at a level 7, you would simply choose a level 7 color, mix it with the correct developer, your end result would be a level 7. Sounds pretty simple. If you want it to be a level 9, they say you simply choose a level 9, mix it with the correct developer, and your end result would be a level 9. So the manufacturers that keep it very systematic and very logical like that keep the same train of thought within their developer strengths. They usually say, for every level of lift you're trying to achieve, you use an extra 10 volume developer. Which translates to, if your client, say, is a natural level 5, you wanted to achieve a level 6, you would simply use a level 6 with 10 volume developer. 10 volume because you're lightening one level. If your client, natural level 5, wants to be a level 7, you would simply choose a level 7 with 20 volume. 20 volume because you're lightening 2 levels. Client wants to be a level 8. If you're starting at a level 5, you would simply choose a level 8 color with 30 volume. 30 volume because you're lightening 3 levels. And so on. A 9, you would choose a 9 with 44 because you're lightening 4 levels. That's how some of the manufacturers teach us to formulate for the level. If they don't teach it that way, they teach it by a chart. And as you see the chart, it has 2 columns. You'll have one column that says natural level. The other column says desired level. You would simply put one finger on the natural level and one finger on the desired level. You slide your fingers down and across, and it tells you what level you need to use to achieve the level you want to end up with. Next to that number, which tells you the level, you'll see a list of letters. Those are your choices in tones to use. The level doesn't change, but the tonal value gives you a choice. You can either use an ash tone, a neutral tone, a warm tone, a red tone, or maybe even a brighter red tone. So those are your basic choices in tones to use. The level doesn't change. The volume of developer doesn't change. Your only choice is what tone to use to achieve the tone you want to end up with. So now that we've gone through both ways that manufacturers teach us to formulate for our level, it seems the choice is always within what tone do I use? Well, what tone to use depends on what tone you want to end up with. I'd like you to remember this statement. The end result of any permanent hair color is always a combination between the artificial pigment or the actual color you're pulling off the shelf and the underlying pigment or the natural hair you're putting the color on. Those two things combine together and they form a whole new color. That is your end result color. So if I've said the end result of any permanent hair color is a combination between artificial pigment and natural underlying pigment, what are they? Let's talk about artificial pigmentation. This is the color wheel. We all remember this from school. The instructor said, this is the law of color. If you know this chart, you'll know hair color. Well, I'm telling you, I knew this chart, but I didn't know hair color. And the teachers told me, if you have blue and you don't want to see blue, you mix an orange with it. The orange and the blue, they come together and form a neutral color. And they said, if you have red and you don't want to see red, you mix a green with it. The red and the green, they come together and they form a more neutral color. So I knew that. I knew that any color I saw, I'd have to look at the wheel, find that color. If I didn't want to see it, I knew to look right on the other side, and that's the color I need to mix with it. So I said, great, I know this color. Let's go to it. So I went to work in the salon, and I had clients start coming in, but I didn't have the clients with the green hair coming into my salon saying, David, I don't want green. And I said, no problem. All I have to do is mix red with it. The red will mix with the green and form a neutral color. And I didn't have the clients coming in with blue hair, well, maybe a couple of the older ones, saying, I don't want my blue hair. And I'd say, no problem. My teacher said, if I don't want blue hair, all I have to do is mix orange with it. The orange and the blue come together to form a neutral color. So because I didn't have those clients coming into my salon, I really didn't see how this, the color wheel, related to hair color. Maybe for an artist, yes, it would relate because they mix their colors together and they paint it on a white canvas and that's the color that they get. So it definitely relates to that. But I was lacking something that told me how the color wheel related to hair color. So let me tell you, in my steps on how I think about it, how the color wheel is to me, or how I look at the color wheel. I look at the color wheel as the artificial pigment, the actual color you're pulling off the shelf. When manufacturers develop their color line, they certainly use the law of color to develop it. They have certain bases to the color. They would have an ash base that range anywhere from your greens through your blues into your violets. All of those are the bases for their ash colors. They might have a warm or a gold series. The base would be anywhere from the yellow to the golds. Then they might have a red base color. Their red bases could be anything from red-orange to a truer red or into your red violets. Those would be your red colors. So I look at this as directly relating to the color sitting on my shelf. The other way I look at the color wheel is the additives that manufacturers make to go into the hair color. They call them additions, additives, modifiers, drabbers. There are a bunch of different names for them, but basically they're all doing the same thing. They're all a tone that you add into your color to form a slightly different or a much different tone as an end result. So if we look at the color wheel very simply cut in half, we have a warm side and we have a cool side. The warm side ranges, of course, we can see the yellows, the golds, orange, red-orange, reds, and your red violets. That's your warm side. The cool side ranges from your olives through your greens, your blue-greens, blues, blue violets, and violet colors. Those are all your cool colors. So, how do the additives help us? When can we use them, and why can we use them? Well, on the warm side, I look at those additives every bit as much as toys as I do necessities. The only time they're necessities to me is when I'm going for better gray coverage, as we'll cover in Section 2. Better gray coverage in the blondes, I usually use my gold additives. In my brown formulas, I use my red-orange additives. That's how I use those, as necessities. How I use them as toys is when I'm using a red color or a golden color, I can use these additives to fine-tune the formula or to tweak it a little bit. If I have a color that I'm really liking it, but I would like to see a little bit more of an orange tone to it, I would use a red-orange addition. If I wanted a little bit more gold to it, I would add a gold additive. If I'm doing a redhead and I want to tone down the orange, I could go down here to a red-violet type of addition. See, those directly relate to each other. They help tone each other or change the tone that you're using. On the cool side, most manufacturers call them drabbers or ash drabbers. Those are what we add into our ash colors to intensify or to add more ash tones into the color. When we need to diminish the warmth, we need to use an ash. If we need to use a stronger ash, we go into our ash drabbers. Most companies make two ash drabbers. They make a light ash drabber and a dark ash drabber. So that's how I look at the color wheel, as the artificial pigment or the additives or the toys or the drabbers. That's how I see that. So artificial pigment combines with natural underlying pigment. Let's take a look at this chart and find out what natural underlying pigmentation is all about. This chart right here represents the color that is within each and every one of our clients' natural hair that our eyes can't see. This chart right here also represents my biggest dilemma when I started coloring hair, because all I knew was the color wheel, and truthfully I didn't even see how that related to hair color until I found out about this. When I see a client with their brown hair, truly I only see brown hair. I'm not really artistic or whatever you have to be to see a color within another color. I just don't have it within me. So I had to learn the hard way through many mistakes and through seeing other people's many mistakes before it dawned on me that these colors actually exist within our client's hair color. I have used the names to describe the levels instead of the numbers, because manufacturers differ in this way also. One manufacturer might call a medium brown a level 5, when another manufacturer might call a medium brown a level 3 or 4. But within my research for this tape, I have found that one manufacturer's medium brown swatch will match another manufacturer's medium brown swatch. Even though the numbers might be different, the names are the same. And that went through all the different levels of color. One manufacturer's medium blonde, they might call it an 8. It would match another manufacturer's medium blonde that might call it a 7. Even though the numbers are different, the names remain the same. So to keep it accurate for the system you're using and the charts you're looking at, I've used the names instead of the numbers on the underlying pigmentation chart. So let's look at a medium brown. The color next to it, high concentration of red. Every client sitting in your chair with natural hair that is a medium brown has a high concentration of red in it. Let's look at a dark blonde. Every client that is sitting in your chair that has natural hair that is a dark blonde has a concentration of an orange or a golden orange within her hair. Don't expect your eyes to see it because they probably won't. But when you lighten that hair, you will expose the underlying pigmentation and you will see that color. So that represents natural underlying pigmentation. I've also heard it called contributing pigmentation. So let's see exactly how these two things combine together and form our end result color. I like to look at permanent hair color, or the underlying pigmentation chart, as doing permanent hair color in two ways. I either work with the underlying pigmentation, meaning I want to end up warm or red, or I work against it, meaning I want to be neutral or even cool. So the first thing, let's talk about working with it. To me, the way I look at color, working with it is the easy part. All you have to do is choose a red or warm color off the shelf, combine it with the correct developer, put it on the natural hair, the warm or red color you're choosing combines with the warmth that's naturally within the hair, and it lightens, and your end result, if you used a red, will be red. If you used a warm or a golden color, it will be warm or golden, depending on which one you used. So the color you're using, the warmer reds, would enhance the underlying pigmentation, and that would be your end result. The only time that differs is when we talk about intensity or brightness levels of a color. Not how light or how dark it is, but the brightness or the intensity of the swatch or of the hair. Some manufacturers offer a range of red heads. They offer subtle reds or more natural looking reds. Then they might have a series that is more red, but still somewhat natural looking. Then they might offer a very fashion red or very bright, intense reds. Those type of color lines, if you're looking for a subtle red, you would simply choose a subtle red, mix it with the correct developer, put it on the hair, it would combine with the underlying pigmentation, your end result would be a subtle red. If you have a color line that only offers you the more intense reds or the brighter reds, it is up to us as hairdressers to think about and remind ourselves, if we don't want to see the intensity, we need to diminish it somehow. So how do we do that? Well, if you're using, let's say, a level 7 red, and it's an intense red, how do we know? By looking at the swatch. If that swatch shows that it's very clean and very clear and very bright, you can be sure your end result will be such. So by looking at the swatch, it'll be able to tell you if it's a bright or intense red, or if it's a subtle or a more natural looking red. So what happens if all they offer us are the brighter, more intense reds? We need to keep in mind that we need to subdue it. We need to make it more of a natural looking red. So how do we do that? Very simply, because level, exact, lightness, darkness, if we took that level 7 red, which is intense, we would need to take a level 7 neutral color off the shelf, mix them together, put it on the hair. You're now creating a red-brown color, or a more neutral red, or a more natural-looking red. It combines with the underlying pigmentation. Your end result would then be a more natural red on a level 7, because both colors you mixed together were level 7s. So that's how you would diminish the intensity level of your color. Simply mix it with a more neutral color. Now, there's no way me standing here looking into a camera that I can tell you how much neutral do you need to add. It depends on the intensity level that they offer and the intensity level that you want to end up with. But what I'm trying to get across is just think that this is what I have to do. A little bit of the amounts to mix are a little trial and error. But as long as you know that if you don't want the intensity, you mix it with the same level, more neutral. And that creates a more natural looking red. As long as you know that you'll need to do that, we're on the right track. So we've discovered how to work with it. It's pretty easy because the tone you're using combines with the underlying pigment and they create that same tone. It enhances it. So let's talk about what I feel is the most difficult, or where I find stylists have the most trouble comprehending. And that's where I ran into my biggest problem. So working against it is when the client comes in and says, I don't want to be red, I want to be neutral, or I don't want any red in the hair. So now we have to work against it. We have to neutralize this color out. Going back to the color wheel or the artificial color, knowing that it's cut in half and we basically have a warm side and a cool side, what best neutralizes warmth? Cool colors or ash colors. That would be your choice to neutralize the warmth. Manufacturers differ now also. Some of the manufacturers will tell you, we have a green-based color, or we have a blue-based color, or a blue-violet color, or a violet-based color. Those are the tones that make up their ash series. Knowing the underlying pigmentation chart, If you're starting with somebody that's a medium brown, what does she have? She has a high concentration of red within her hair. If you do not want to see the red and you're lightening the hair, what base best neutralizes the red? That would be a green base or a blue-green base color. It sits across from red, it best neutralizes the red. Or if you're starting with a dark blonde, she has somewhat of an orange color within her hair. What best neutralizes the orange? We see that blue is sitting across from orange. Blue would be your choice in that level. In your lighter natural levels, the violet would be your best choice because violet is sitting across from yellow. They would neutralize each other out and form a more neutral color. If you're working with a manufacturer such as the one I'm currently working with, it doesn't tell you what the predominant base is within that ash color. All they say is, this is our ash series. So all I'm going to say about that is trust that the manufacturer and the chemists have built into that color the correct ash base for the level that you're using. They've tried to make it very simple for us to use. All we have to think about, if we don't want to see that warmth, we use an ash color. Since they don't complicate it or make it very targeted, they make it easy with, these are our ash colors. So, when we're lightening, if we do not want to see any red or warmth in the hair, we use an ash color. If we do want to see red or warmth in the hair, we simply use a red or warm color. That's your basic formulations. Let's take it one step further, and we're going to bring in now developer strengths that we learned about. The higher the volume that you do need to use to get the lift you're looking for, the minimum deposit you get. Remember that. So if we're lightening more than 2 levels and we do not want to see any warmth, we need to use our ash drabbers. We need to mix those drabbers into our colors to subdue or to neutralize the warmth. Because remembering, if we're lightening 3 or 4 levels, we're using a 30 or 40 volume developer to get the lift we need. We're not getting the deposit or the control of the underlying pigmentation. So we need to go in with stronger ash tones, ash drabbers. That's why all the manufacturers make them. Not because they want to sell it to us, but because they're necessary in what we're trying to do. The lighter you're going, the more ash drabbers you need to use. Now, how much ash drabber do I need to use? I don't know. I'm looking into a camera, I'm talking to many people that use many different color lines. But within the directions of the color line, which you should always follow, it will give you a range to use. 2 to 4 capfuls, 1/4 to 1/2 ounce. It'll give you a range. If you're using 30 volume, you might want to start gradual with it. If you're using 40 volume, you might want to start with a little bit more. But as long as you know why you need to use them, and that you do need to use them when you're lightening 3 or 4 levels, again, we're on the right track. This is not necessarily how to do color. It's how to think about color. Because I believe if you can think about color, you can do color. Color theory, as we learned, is color theory. It's kind of like gravity. You can't really question it. It's just there. So, as long as we know that they're on your shelf, dust them off, find them, use them. It's always a combination, so don't look at the swatch and say, this is really gross looking, I can't use this color on her hair. Remember, that color that's very ashy is going to combine with the natural hair that is very warm inside, and they're going to form a more neutral color. All fine and good. Now we know how to think about artificial pigment and how it relates to hair color. You're probably telling me, well, I've used an ash color with an ash drabber and 30 or 40 volume on my client who's a medium brown, and I still come up warm. How come? If I'm standing here telling you, if you use an ash color with an ash drabber, you'll neutralize the warmth. And that's not so. That brings us to the limitations of permanent hair color. Permanent hair color does have limitations. There are only a few, but they're definite. The better we as stylists understand what the limitations are, how to work within the limitations, and one way to get over the limitations, we'll be doing very, very well with thinking about hair color. We talk about hair color as having a level and having a tone. There's a limitation for each. Let's first talk about the limitation within the level. As we know, permanent hair color can lift up to 4 levels. All the manufacturers have it. Our color lifts up to 4 levels. When we're talking about the dark hair, dark brown and darker natural levels, that's where the words up to come into play. Because of the depth of the color and the amount and type of underlying pigmentation, it's very rare that we get a full 4 levels of lift starting in those darker colors. That's about the only limitation with level, is when we're talking dark brown and darker, it's very rare that we can get 4 full levels of lift. We can usually easily get 3 levels, and sometimes even a little bit more than 3 levels. But almost never can you get a full 4 levels of lift. So those are the words up to 4 levels. Now let's talk about the limitations in tone. What are the limitations in our actual color that we can end up? Well, medium brown, high concentration of red within the hair. So with medium brown and darker natural levels, when we're lightening them 3 and 4 levels, you will always be somewhat warm. Even if you use an ash color, even if you use an ash drabber, because the way permanent hair color works, the higher the volume that you're using to get the lift you need, the less control or the less deposit you get to neutralize the warmth. So no matter how hard we try, no matter whose color line we use, if you're lightening a medium brown and darker, if you're lightening them 3 or 4 levels, always expect to be warm. Always communicate to your client if she's sitting within this range of natural hair and you're lightening her, please explain to her beforehand that the end result is going to be somewhat warmer than the neutral swatch. If you tell that to your client beforehand, it's a reason the color can't do what she wants. If you tell her afterwards, it's an excuse why you couldn't get the color you said you could. So understand the limitation and work within the limitation. The best you can do in one process when you're trying to lighten this medium brown, even light brown colors, a full 4 levels, is to use a high lift tint or a high lift color. They're also called ultralight colors, depending on the manufacturer you're currently using. What those promise us is maximum lift with maximum deposit in a single process. It's a little bit of a twist, because what I said earlier was the lighter you're lightening the client, you're into your 30, 40 volumes, you're getting minimum deposit. So the chemists have formulated these ultralights, or these high lift colors, which offer us maximum lift with maximum deposit or maximum control of the underlying pigmentation. Kind of the best of both worlds. So most manufacturers make 3 different ultralights, 3 tonal values. When you use them, always expect to be a full 4 levels lighter. The tonal values is where you have a choice. Usually they make 3, an ultralight or a high lift ash, an ultralight or a high lift neutral or natural, and an ultralight or a high lift beige or maybe a golden series. Those are the tonal values you can choose from within your high lift colors. If you do not want to see any warmth in the hair, you would use what? The ultralight ash. Why ash? Because it will neutralize out the warmth that's naturally within the hair. If you're starting in your light browns or your dark blondes, you're out of your deep reds, So you could go into your more neutral high lift or ultralight color, and it would still counteract or neutralize out some of this warmth. If you're looking for that true beige tone, and you're using the beige ultralight or high lift color, you're best starting within your dark blonde colors or slightly lighter. Because the beige, if it combines with too much of the red, your end result will not be beige. It'll be warmer than beige. Remember, it's always a combination. Okay? If you take beige and you mix it with red, as you're lightening, you no longer are going to end up beige. You're going to end up warmer or slightly grainier than beige. So I like to recommend on your medium browns, you use the high lift ash. On your light browns, dark blondes, you can choose whether you want to use your golden color or your more natural high lift or ultralight color. Another caution, even though the high lift or ultralight colors give you maximum lift, maximum control, if you're starting with a medium brown natural level and you're using a high lift or an ultralight ash color, yes, you'll be a full 4 levels lighter, but you will still be somewhat of a golden blonde. How come? Well, that's a limitation within the ultralights as well. Because of the high concentration of red in here, it's very, very difficult to control it all. You'll still end up somewhat of a golden blonde. The finer, the thinner the hair, remember texture from way back at the beginning, the finer, thinner hair, yes, you might be very close to neutral. The thicker, coarser hair, you might be a little bit more on the golden side. Because thicker, coarser hair has more of the underlying pigmentation that makes up that hair strand. Finer, thinner hair has less of it. They both have it. They both have the colors. But, of course, thicker, coarser would have more in it. Thinner, finer would have less in it. Okay? So the tones will change depending on the texture of the hair. But always expect to be, with the medium brown, always expect to be somewhat warm. Always follow your manufacturer's directions because they will tell you the darkest level they recommend using those on and the lightest level they recommend using them on. They vary slightly, but the directions are always within the tube or bottle of color you're using. So do always follow the directions. Just know what they are and why they are and how they differ from your standard color within that same line. Their maximum lift, maximum deposit, or maximum control of the underlying pigmentation. Okay, now that we've talked about the levels, the artificial pigment, the natural underlying pigment, how everything works together, how when we formulate we decide what level we want to be, separately from what tone we want to be. We can intermix our tones. We can mix a red with a neutral if we want to make a more subtle red, or a red with a more golden color if we want it to be more of a golden red. We discussed that we can add in our additives to our color. If we want to make this red a little bit more of an orange tone or an orangey red, we could add in our red-orange addition to the color. If we want to subdue the orange look in your lighter reds, we might want to choose a red-violet addition to the color. We've talked about the cool side in our ash drabbers. We discussed when and why to use them. We went over the volumes of developer and how they affect our end results. And we've gone through our high lift colors. Now all of that information together, thinking about each different component separately to make up one whole end result, will and should help you better understand how we think about hair color. This is now the end of our first section. The second section, we will get into better gray coverage. We'll get into our redheads, how to maintain our redheads, our blondes, how to maintain our blondes, and we'll touch a little bit on double process blonde, when and why we need to go into our double process blondes. So until then, I'll see you on Section 2.